The Honorable Senator Mary Landrieu kicked us off with exactly the kind of clarity and conviction this moment requires. She reminded us that experience and leadership matter, especially in a sector as complex and consequential as energy. Thank you so much, Senator. She may be walking in, maybe she's here, but I just wanted to thank her personally. Also want to mention that so far we've dug into the real work, the high-level strategies in steering the energy transition. We tackled the big question of energy affordability and security, because innovation means nothing if our communities cannot access or afford it. We explored how sustainability and supplier development aren't parallel tracks, but shared lanes. Thank you to Toyota and my colleague Evelyn for leading that very important conversation. Now, I also want to thank our moderators, our panelists today, and every participant who's showed up to learn, listen, and connect. And of course, none of this would be possible without our incredible sponsors. Your support fuels more than just events. It powers partnerships, opportunities, and a future where diversity and innovation move in tandem. Also, just a quick reminder that the mission of this Energy Summit and the mission of the USHCC is to bring together stakeholders across the energy spectrum to exchange knowledge, shape policy, and ensure small and Hispanic businesses aren't just part of the energy evolution, they're driving it. And judging by what we've seen so far, I'd say we're doing just that. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, the CEO of MAD Global Strategy Group and one of the most respected minds in political and corporate public affairs. He's been in the room and at the table advising presidents, governors, Fortune 500 CEOs, and nonprofit leaders on how to navigate the intersection of public opinion, government influence, and business impact. His ability to decode complex challenges and deliver clear winning strategies has made him a go-to advisor across the country and across sectors. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Mike DuHaime.
Thank you. That was a great introduction. Whoever wrote that should have a full-time job in PR. That was fantastic. So thank you for having me. I appreciate being part of this. It's a great event, and I'm here to talk a little bit about natural allies and then natural gas and its place in politics today. I don't know if everybody's been following, but politics is a little bit unpredictable lately, and with that policy also follows. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of where we are in the energy space of that, because somehow over the last 20 years or so, energy has become a complete political football, and it really shouldn't be that way. At the end of the day, people want to flip the light switch, and they want the lights to come on, and they want to pay a fair price for it, and they want reliability and affordability. And somewhere along the way, politics have really interfered in that. So what we've tried to do at Natural Allies is put together an organization that brings together the center-right, the center-left together to talk in a pragmatic way to meet these energy challenges that we have going forward. This is our leadership council, our group, Senator Mary Landrieu, who everybody here has, I think, already heard from today, and is just like fantastic. As folks can see, she's just dynamic. Former U.S. Senator from Louisiana, former Congressman Tim Ryan from Ohio, former Mayor of Philadelphia, Michael Nutter, and former Congressman from Florida, Kendrick Meek. All, as you might see, if you know politics, all Democrats, all kind of center-left Democrats that trying to help us make sure that we get our message out about ultimately lowering emissions and the shared goals that we have, that we really have as Americans to lower emissions, but also to do so in a way that's affordable while keeping energy reliable. And that message really needs to be brought a little bit more to the left than to the right. The right has been, pretty good on this, but as time goes by, we see that we really need to bring the center left and the center right together responsibly on that. Who we are, you'll see up here, I won't go through everybody, but you see companies, you see end users like Fertilizer Institute, NAM, you see labor up here, plumbers, pipe fitters, Teamsters, operating engineers. You see this great coalition of business, labor, and end users who are trying to find that sensible middle ground here about how do we continue to lower emissions while continuing to make this affordable and reliable, and how do we take the politics a little bit out of it, and how do we let good policies dictate what we do here. And this is a great group of people who put their money where their mouth is and put their prestige where we need it to try to help us solve this problem. So quickly, why should we care about natural gas? I think everybody here for the most part has heard about this, but just to put some statistics there, nearly half of our energy comes from natural gas. This was not the case 20 years ago. We've had an energy revolution under our soil that's come to fruition in the last 20 years that give us incredible independence, nationally, gives us incredible national security, and natural gas is providing that. And it's also, at the same time, lowering emissions, helping clean the air, clean our water, and make sure that we live a nice quality of life, all while keeping energy affordable and reliable as we go forward. You can see there are other sources there. You still see coal as a big piece, but that's gone down. Wind, you have nuclear in there that continues to play at hydro, and you see renewables starting to come up. But what you see is you can't wave a magic wand and just say, hey, listen, we should move and let's get renewables. It's just not there yet. It's getting better, but natural gas is allowing renewables to grow in a way where we still have that reliability that we need going forward. But this just gives you some perspective in terms of where we are as a country now in terms of how we use, where our energy sources come from. Over 60% of Americans use natural gas directly in their homes, whether that's through heating or electric generation. It's affordable, it's reliable. That's really what most voters care about. If you've walked into this room and you've looked at one slide of anything today, you are no longer like an average voter. You are far from an average voter. And that's something that people in politics need to always kind of drill home. The average voters don't come to events like this. They don't think about energy like you do. They don't think about all the complexities behind it. What they think about is they want the light switch to go on. If the power goes out with a storm, they want it to come back on quickly, and they want to pay, frankly, as little as they can for it. That's what they care about. And so what you see here is this impacts everybody every day. And you see on the right, you can see how much less expensive natural gas has been, and that's important. And it's really important in today's politics in terms of what people expect from their leaders in terms of how they're going to provide for them, is to make sure that affordability crisis is met. The next slide just shows how much natural gas is used in so many different sectors. I've got this awesome pointer. I should probably use it instead of but all the different pieces, like natural gas is so important to this, and the one I want to point out at the top is probably most important is food and agriculture. Natural gas is important for fertilizer. 70 to 90% of fertilizer doesn't happen without natural gas, and we don't get our food supply without natural gas. When you think about what we went through during COVID, just imagine if there had been a mass interruption of our food supply. Imagine what that would have meant to the chaos in this country. And natural gas makes this happen, makes it, all the things that many Americans take for granted wouldn't happen without natural gas playing an important role. This next slide is super important in terms of where we've come over the last 20 years and what this means for our emissions. And I stole this from Neil Brown at PPI, so you should go to Neil if you want really good slides. Neil at PPI provides great slides. This was also used in his recent breakout session. But you can see on the left, you can see what our energy supply was 20 years ago, 25 years ago now, and what it was just a few years ago, and see how much it's changed. And you can see the brown is coal. So all throughout the country, you can see how coal was the dominant energy supplier throughout the country. And now you can see how much it's changed and see how much natural gas has infiltrated that and really where that's going. You still see nuclear as a big player in places like Illinois, South Carolina, but look at where nuclear was a big player at one point in the Northeast. That is not being replaced by renewables. As nuclear goes offline, it's being replaced by natural gas. The reason our emissions are going down is because those states that had coal now have natural gas. It's not just because of the renewables. Renewables are taking a bigger and bigger place, but they just couldn't take coal offline. Natural gas has essentially taken coal, big chunks of coal offline, which has made the air much cleaner and those emissions much lower for us. Whoa, my slides went away. Oh, they're up over there. Okay. I don't know what I would have done there. Thank goodness. So that's a huge part of this. And as you see this, ironically, if you look, interestingly, where you see renewables actually taking the biggest stand are in the center of the country. Look at where wind is. Look at where wind is how important wind is kind of in the center of the country. If you look at states like South Dakota, Iowa, Kansas, you look at how much wind is, and you look at that stat over on the far right in terms of where the wind comes from. A lot of it is in these red states. So it just shows that the politics of this need to be taken out. When you have red states investing and doing so well with renewables, we need to be doing that all over. I'm from New Jersey, where the governor is very aggressive in his clean energy goals, and we have not built any windmills off the Jersey Shore because a whole bunch of reasons. People don't want to look at them, getting the transmission done. So these incredible goals, all during that time, one of our nuclear reactors, we have 4, went offline. All that production was replaced by natural gas. Thank goodness it wasn't replaced by coal. The goal was for that to be replaced by renewables, but they're just not there yet. So natural gas is allowing those renewables time to do this while making sure we have the security and reliability that we have. So you can just see that dramatic difference right there in terms of like how much the country has changed in terms of energy production with the opportunity to have that. The Northeast problem, for many people that or maybe are not from the Northeast, don't know that, New York and New England have kind of stopped allowing transmission to go into pipelines, essentially to go into New England. So in New England, for example, in New Hampshire, they still have a coal plant operational. In Massachusetts, during cold snaps recently, they were importing Russian liquefied natural gas because they couldn't get natural gas from Pennsylvania. Those things need to be fixed because we have an incredible revolution under our own ground, and we need to make sure we use it. Just a little bit here, the map on the right, just the chart on the left. Don't expect everybody to see all that or have a quiz on that later, but that just shows the emissions reductions we've had as a result of natural gas and as a result of renewables, and seeing them work together over the last 20 years, and how much those emissions reductions are compared to the energy supplies we had 20 years ago. And the map on the right, this just shows all the coal plants that are continuing to be operational in the U.S. So you see not as many on the West Coast and the Pacific Northwest, not as many in New England, and a little bit in the Mid-Atlantic, New York, New Jersey area, but you still see a lot of coal plants operational. As natural gas continues to be abundant, our supplies and our air will be cleaner as natural gas continues to do that, and renewables take a bigger role here as well. Now to a little bit to the politics of this. Better than 2/3 of folks believe that a balanced approach, an all of the above approach, as people are fond of saying in politics, is better than just all, strictly going just renewables and phasing out all fossil fuels. People are very pragmatic. Voters are not extreme in one side or the other. They want, again, as I said, at the end of the day, they want government for the most part out of their lives, and they want to make their lives a little bit better. And one way to make our lives better is making sure that energy is reliable and affordable. But even Democrats, a majority of Democrats support this. And I think what you have oftentimes in politics, the conversation, whether it's about energy or anything else, is dominated by the extremes of either party. And sometimes in the energy discussion in politics, the far left has been louder than the center left. And we're trying to make sure we give a voice to that, to make sure people understand that most Democrats, most people in America want a sensible, pragmatic approach that continues to lower emissions, continues to allow for renewables to grow, and continues to have natural gas as a big part of making sure that we can continue to provide that affordability and reliability piece to this. What's coming next in the U.S. is going to be massive. People have talked about this a little bit already today, but the revolution that's coming with AI and the opportunity that we have, both from a national security perspective as well as good, high-paying jobs, is incredible, and what AI is going to bring. But the energy demand that's going to come is incredible. When you think about, one data center takes as much energy as the city of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. When you look at some of the stats we have up here about how many, we're essentially creating 7 more New York cities in terms of energy demand over the next few decades when it comes to AI. We can't get there unless we make important, sensible, pragmatic solutions about energy supply and making sure we have the infrastructure in place to do this, and that we take a sensible approach to make sure we have the capacity on the grid. And we won't do that if we try to pit everybody against each other. If we decide that we all want to work together and we want to put as much energy on the grid as possible, make sure with the infrastructure in place and the right and the left don't fight, but instead work together on this, we'll be okay and we'll be positioned. Because if not, these data centers are going somewhere else. And China is going to be investing heavily in this. And so if we want for national security purposes as well as for our own economic purposes, we're going to want to be doing smart things when it comes to the grid to make sure that we are in place for the AI revolution that's coming. So this is a little bit now about the shifting political winds. I'll start with just a little bit about politics of the last 20 years or so. American politics was pretty stable from the Depression all the way until about 2005, 2006. And what I mean by that, we had presidents that went back and forth from both parties, but Congress, from the Depression all the way until 1994, was essentially Democratic Party. Americans were kind of happy. If they needed a little check and balance, we'd elect a Republican president, then we go back to a Democrat. But for the most part, during all that time, whether it was FDR to Truman to Kennedy, or Republicans like Nixon and Reagan, for the most part, we had Democrats controlling the House because people were happy. People were basically somewhat content, and they'd shift a little bit as things happened in the Cold War or other things. But for the most part, people were content. 1994 comes. There's a shift. Republicans come in. For the most part, that's actually fairly content too. They keep a Democratic president for a while, keep divided government, and then it goes 12 years of Republican control. So from 1932 all the way to 2006, we had a lot of stability. You had one major flip of the House at that time. There was a minor one when Eisenhower was president. It was so popular that he brought some people in, and then 2 years later they came back out. Since that time, everybody's mad. Voters are mad. They're mad at everybody. If you don't have a solution, they're ready to throw you out. So in 2005, 2006, I was political director of the RNC at that time. It was not an easy time to have that job during the height of the Iraq War, unpopularity around Hurricane Katrina, and people were a little bit fed up. 2006, Democrats come in. The voters put Democrats in charge of the Senate and the House, and they kept a Republican president. And then in 2008, they bring in a Democratic president. So Democrats control everything. But then as soon as the voters do that, they say, wait a second, we don't want one party in control of everything. And in 2010, Republicans come back to the House. 2012, Americans elect divided government. 2014, Americans elect a Republican U.S. Senate. So it's further divided. So we continue to have basically people at odds, which is what the voters want. Then 2016, Donald Trump comes in, and so you have Republicans in control of everything. But as soon as the voters do that, they say, wait a second, we didn't actually mean that. And the Democrats come back in 2018 with the Senate and the House. 2020, Joe Biden comes in, and they say right away, whoa, we didn't mean that either. And Republicans come back and control the House in 2022. And now President Trump obviously wins again in 2024 with a very slim majority in the House. It probably doesn't take a genius to figure out where the House is going to go next time as well. But the last 20 years, people have been upset and mad for basically government not meeting their needs, not meeting their desires, and great skepticism with government. And as soon as we put you in, we're going to throw you out as soon as we put you in. And then when we throw you out, we'll put you back in, which is what happened with President Trump, right? So this is where politics are right now. So it's important to understand the shifting political winds and the pressure that is on government. In the last panel room I was in, the last small breakout room, Senator Landrieu talked about the power of politics right now. It is powerful. If you're part of a coalition group and you can speak to a governor, a U.S. senator, your local House member, you have power. You can change people's minds. You can help them see the light when it comes to policy like this. And so you're seeing this right now on the left, where Democrats 10 years ago were like, we're going green, the Green New Deal, things like that. We're going all the way. That's not happening anymore. You look at just some of these examples here. This is the governor of Connecticut basically saying he agrees with President Trump when it comes to needing more natural gas into New England. Believe me, Democratic governors were not running around talking about how much they agree with President Trump on much of anything. On energy, they certainly are. Maryland Democrats floating natural gas. That is one of the most Democratic states in the country. Maryland, from a statistical point of view, one of the most Democratic states in the entire country, talking about bringing in more natural gas. You have the governor of Massachusetts also talking about that, changing her mind on some of the projects that she had in terms of now investing in some of these projects. And in New Jersey, where Democrats for the last 10 years have been killing every good energy project, are now sitting there saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe prices are going up. But now they're looking for whose fault it is. It's them if they look in the mirror. But now they're starting to embrace some of the things that they were fighting against. So we have these great opportunities ahead. This just shows you a little bit of map. The U.S. Senate is coming up. This is the U.S. Senate races in the next 2 years. The U.S. Senate is unlikely to flip just because of the nature of the states that are there. This is like an objective look at where the swing states are and where the states, you can see by this map, the dark red are Republican incumbents essentially that are up, or safe Republican seats. The dark blue are considered safe Democratic seats. So it's unlikely that the Senate is really going to flip without something massively dramatic happening just based on the states. And then these are governors. Governors tend to be far more pragmatic. They don't always follow the simple blue-red pattern that you see in national politics all the time. Governors get hit with pragmatism pretty hard. So these governors' races are going to be hugely important, and obviously they have massive impact on local economies, local energy decisions, and so they have a huge impact here. So there's a lot more. The gold states are ones that are considered toss-ups by quote-unquote national experts on that. So governors is where you tend to see many upsets. But these are going to be, so there's so many races up. So in 2 years, there's going to be another potential massive political shift. You have the entire House up with a very, very slim majority. Historically, you've seen this swing back and forth with the House. The Senate being unlikely to change. And you've got 38 governors' races up in 2 years. So in a time of massive volatility in American politics, it's a great opportunity for everybody here to have an impact on the issues that you care greatly about. According to my timer, I've got about 2.5 minutes left. If anybody has any questions, I will be happy to take them, or I'll try to tell a few jokes or anything else to fill the remainder of the time. But wanted to make sure I left a couple minutes for questions or disagreements or anything like that, if anybody wants to yell. It's hard to see with all these lights. I feel like maybe I should be like maybe a rock star or something with all these lights, but happy to take any questions if I can see anybody's hands. Maybe Mayor Villagrosa, you got anything, Mayor? My favorite former mayor of LA? Yes, sir.
I'll repeat that if you want.
Yes, thanks.
Can you tell us, based upon the presentation, which was amazing and very
thank you.
clear, the DOGE impact on energy policy?
I think it's interesting. The DOGE impact right now. I might need more than 1:40 left to talk about the DOGE impact on American politics. Here's what I'd say about DOGE impact. Most people, if you don't live inside the Beltway, think that the government is too big and wastes too much money, and there should be something that happens that limits the size of government. They also don't think it should impact them in any way, right? So that's where the rub is. And so when you start to see, the DOGE impact, the question when it comes to things like Medicaid cuts or anything like that, that's where you're going to see things happen. I don't see the president's administration doing anything that would harm energy production or affordability or reliability. So I don't know that DOGE is going to, quote unquote, hurt kind of where we're going from an energy point of view. I think the policies of the current administration and the current Congress are going to be very supportive of energy, kind of an all of the above approach in terms of energy supply and affordability. So I think DOGE is going to focus on other parts of the government where they think there's, quote unquote, waste, fraud, and abuse, where they can bring it down. And I think most of the voters will be supportive of that until something happens like, a hospital closes in their district and somebody says that's because of Medicaid cuts or something like that. But in terms of energy, I don't think it's going to impact energy. I think where the administration currently is very supportive. I think I've got time for one more if there is one more. If not, I don't want to. It's a very impressive group back there that's going to keep us on schedule. Somebody pointing to a question? Yes, I see a question.
We were just curious about the slide that showed New Mexico. It was our highest electricity was from wind.
Told you I stole that slide from Neil Brown. If you don't agree, you can yell at Neil. It says that's hydro, I think. No, it's wind. It's wind, yep. Get Neil up here if you disagree.
We're just curious. I've seen that before.
I'm not an expert in the supply of New Mexico. So if anybody is, I'm happy to have someone else. I'm happy to yield the floor to anybody who has got the facts and figures of New Mexico. I can pull it up though. I can get it in like 5 minutes and tell you what the energy mix is of like any state in terms of where it is. So I can bring out to you what the energy mix is. All right. I'm waiting for like one of those big comedic hooks to come and take me, but. All right, where we go. Thank you. Thanks very much. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Mike, for that powerful message and for reminding us how strategy and storytelling shape everything from public trust to business success. We very much appreciate your time. And now I have the honor of introducing one of our key partners and true champions of this summit. Please join me in welcoming the Executive Director of Natural Allies for a Clean Energy Future. I just want to say a few words about this very humble woman. With over 40 years of experience in the energy industry, she's deeply committed to educating decision makers and consumers about the essential role of natural gas and its infrastructure in accelerating a clean energy future. Prior to joining Natural Allies, Susan served as Vice President of Stakeholder Engagement and Public Awareness at Enbridge, where she led efforts for more than 70 multi-million-dollar infrastructure expansion projects and spearheaded nationally recognized ESG and sustainability programs. I also want to mention that FERC also honored her for her leadership in integrating stakeholder engagement and environmental justice practices into major pipeline and LNG projects. More importantly, our next speaker has become a friend and has been truly instrumental in curating and shaping this very summit. Her partnership, wisdom, and her heart have helped bring the vision to life. Please join me in welcoming Susan Waller to the stage.
You know, isn't it great when you have fun in your job? I mean, I love the fact that I get to work with the chamber. I mean, this has been the most incredible experience. I met Synthia a year ago in Washington, D.C., and it was a large group of people, and when they went around the table asking, okay, where are you from? And she said, Santa Fe. I went, I'm from Santa Fe. So, of course, our friendships just blossomed from there, and we've now signed an MOU with the Chamber, and we are going to work with you in terms of messaging, you know, getting our energy messages out. So with that, I just want to say thank you, and I deeply and greatly appreciate each one of you. Thank you so much.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Everybody having a great time? So, my name is Ernie Baca. I'm the president and CEO of the Albuquerque Hispano Chamber of Commerce. And I also serve on the board of the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. So, I'm really excited that we do this event here. Do you all love it here? All right, good. I love to hear that. So, you know, I like my job, so I want to keep it. So I want to say, I think I have my chair of my board somewhere here. I can't see because of the lights. Angela, and I have other board members. I have staff here. Well, I want to thank Synthia Jaramillo, the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce staff, and my staff is here helping out. So thank them all for the great work they're doing here. So thank you. Thank you. So we're excited that you're here. But one of the things I really want to bring out that's really kind of nice is that, you know, it's all about the people you get to know here, the people you get to learn from and get to know, and later on form relationships and business relationships. It's great. So one of the things I didn't realize is what Mary Landriel said this morning. You know, so we all learned something, and that is the energy industry is 7% of the economy in the United States. But the other 93% would not exist without the 7%. So that's how important energy is in the United States. And I never thought about it that way, but that's what it is. And so that's why it's so important that we have these summits and continue to learn about energy in the United States. And the cool thing I want to let you know is when you're backstage and you have the green room, you take a simple little speech and you make it really complex. So I just want to let you know that. So this summit has brought together a dynamic mix of leaders, engineers, policymakers, researchers, business innovators, and environmental advocates. As you know, we are gathered here at a pivotal moment in history around the world, and especially New Mexico, because we're such an energy hub. We are witnessing a profound transformation in how we generate, distribute, and use energy. And, from solar farms to desert plains to innovative hydrogen technologies and cutting-edge grid modernization, the work being done in the energy sector today is not just technical, it's deeply human. So the energy sector is undergoing profound transformation, requiring strategic leadership across all facets of the industry, and that's why you're here. Because you all are leaders. You all are people that can help make things change, make things work. The most crazy thing that Melanie Kenderdine taught me a couple of years ago is the fact that everybody kind of wants to get rid of certain kinds of energy, certain kinds of fuel. A lot of it is fossil fuel, and sometimes it even goes, we know about coal, we know about oil, but sometimes people are even going after natural gas. But one of the things she said that's so profound was, you can't have increasing demand and lower your supply. So we got to be very careful as a country, and as a group here, we need to be talking about the best ways to do that. So the last thing I want to say is I'm between you and lunch that's being served, so I can speak for another 30 minutes or so, or I can end it now. So I go with the applause. Which one? End it now? Thank you all for being here. I appreciate you very much.
Distinguished guests, we hope you've enjoyed your meal. Now, we are pleased to bring you your next featured panel, The Role of Energy in National Resilience and Economic Growth. Please welcome our moderator, Senior Manager of the American Petroleum Institute, Miss Allison Weinberg, followed by our distinguished panel.
Good afternoon, Santa Fe. I know you've just had a delicious lunch and are ready to dive into another discussion, but before we get started, I just want to thank the incredible team at the Hispanic Chamber and take a moment to recognize a chamber doing an energy summit, an industry-specific summit for our industry is so important. I've looked at their calendar. There's no other industry that has their own summit, so we know that we are your favorite and we really appreciate it. All right, so I want to welcome Lane Wilson from Williams. He's the SVP and General Counsel for Williams. And Doug Turner, the CEO of Agenda. Both of their bios are in the app, and I don't want to waste time on that. I want to get right into the discussion. They both provide an incredible wealth of knowledge, and there's a lot going on. So Doug, I want to start with you to set the stage for us. Where are we in energy policy and politics today, and how is it impacting the industry's ability to provide affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy?
I think that the fact that we have a new president who is sort of, let's make things happen, I think is promising, although that's not necessarily sustainable over time. But I think one of the biggest problems that we have in this country is a lack of infrastructure. We talk a lot about generation of renewable energy, wind, solar, but if you generate it and you have no way to move it, then it's not really worth very much. And I give you an example. Here in New Mexico, we have had a power line which is currently owned by Pattern, but it was independently developed. It's 20 years in the process and it's still not operational. So if we look at these linear projects such as pipelines, if you look at the Northeast in the US where you don't have them, you have people putting fuel oil in their homes, or transmission lines for new power generation. If it takes 20 years to build that sort of infrastructure, we have a real problem on our hands. And I think that's really kind of existential in this conversation of sort of all of the above, because if we don't have a way to move it, we don't have a way to use it.
That's right. Lane, your background as a federal judge, I want to get your perspective on the legal and regulatory environment. He's talking about 20 years to build a project. Permitting reform is so important. What is your take on what is happening right now in the regulatory and legal environment?
Yeah, I really couldn't have said it any better than Doug did. In terms of the permitting environment right now, there are parts of the country where we can build pipelines and we can build them fairly quickly. Unfortunately, those are the parts of the country that probably need those pipelines less than other areas. For example, the Northeast. Doug mentioned 20 years, as you said, to build a transmission line. You just can't build a pipeline in the Northeast right now unless you're laying in your own right-of-way in what they call a brownfield project, and then you might not even get it done. There are states that just simply won't allow you to do that. And so we've increased our natural gas demand in this country over the last 10, 15 years by about 50%. We've increased our storage for natural gas about 2%, and we've increased our pipeline capacity by about 24%. That is not a good recipe for resilience or reliability. And so we've got to be able to build linear infrastructure. We have to be able to build transmission lines. We also have to be able to build a lot more natural gas pipelines. We don't have an effective battery right now for wind and for solar. And if you don't have a battery, and natural gas is the best battery for wind and solar, if you don't have a battery, then you're going to see blackouts, you're going to see brownouts. And unfortunately, I think a lot of parts of the country are going to see that this summer. We're on the ragged edge in terms of the ability to provide energy to people when they need it, when it's really warm or when it's really cold in this country.
So from an industry perspective, what does Congress and everyone in the states, what do they need to do in order to kind of fix some of these existential problems? Because in order for us to meet the demand in just AI alone, 20 years to build something, 15 years, 5 years to build something is not enough time.
Yeah, so I'll take that first. Look, this is not much different than a situation where we're building highways across the state. If you're Arkansas and you want to say, look, we're not going to allow a highway to go from Oklahoma to Tennessee, everybody would sort of laugh at you and say, no, you don't get to do that. There's something called the Commerce Clause in the Constitution. Congress can come in and say, we're going to go ahead and build that highway. Congress has said, we're going to build pipelines. They've also said in many ways, we're going to build transmission lines. But you have states that are stepping in because of local issues, and oftentimes issues that really aren't legitimate issues, and have said, no, you're not going to build that transmission line across our state because it may impact a local utility. No, you're not going to build that pipeline across our state, maybe because we're not getting any of the gas or we're not getting any of the electricity or power that's coming off of that. The fix is actually fairly easy. It is to take the statutes, for example, the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, make sure that all of us comply with those. None of us are trying to get out of the requirements under those acts. In fact, we are doing everything we can to comply with those acts, and we do comply with them. But take that out of local decision-making and put it in the hands of, for example, FERC, who oversees pipelines, put it maybe in the hands of another agency that might oversee transmission lines. Once you do that, you will see no environmental impact. In other words, the environmental impact will be negligible, and you'll begin to see transmission lines get built, and you'll begin to see more pipelines get built. And as a country, we're going to be in a much, much better position. People will even begin to see lower increases in their energy costs.
Doug, you work with a lot of clients across the world, across all industries, including energy. What does the uncertainty of this moment do to large businesses, small businesses, and how do they kind of navigate this moment?
I mean, no one likes uncertainty. I think the challenge is, we know what the solutions are. I mean, Lane just described some solutions. I think, organizations like the Texas Pipeline Association, there are laws codified in places like Texas that fast-track resolution of issues, of land use issues in terms of, transmission. But we also have issues here that, in a state like New Mexico, where you have so much federal land and the feds get in the way. And I think where businesses can really engage is on an advocacy level. If we expect the government to solve a problem, we're going to be waiting that 20 years. There has to be engagement by small businesses. The challenge in this space is that it's really asymmetric. People who oppose pipelines or people who oppose infrastructure or people who oppose oil and gas, just, plain and simple, generally have resources, they have time on their hands, they have education, and they can mobilize against projects. People who generally would support them, people who want low-cost energy, people want access to jobs, they're working to put food on the table, take care of their kids, and they don't have the time to show up at a state capitol building and testify. So the challenge that I think we have is how do we, create an environment that allows that mobilization, and that is one of the toughest things in this space.
That's right. The small business work that we do at API, they're trying to make payroll. They're trying to make the best of what they do, and having the spare time to educate policymakers on these issues is not only hard, but it's very unnerving in this very divided political environment that we are in. So Lane, Williams works with a lot of partners, small businesses on these advocacy issues. What is your advice for small businesses in this moment?
I mean, I'd say the same thing Doug said. You have to get out and advocate. We were sort of, or like to look at ourselves as sort of a sleepy pipeline company. I think the rest of the industry did as well for a long time, and we realized 7, 8 years ago that just wasn't working. Alan Armstrong, our CEO, started Natural Allies. Kinder Morgan jumped on board very quickly, and that's a means by which we're trying to educate folks that, look, energy is quality of life. I mean, there's nothing else that has a one-to-one impact on quality of life other than energy. You have access to cheap, reliable energy, you have a higher quality of life than those who don't. And Natural Allies is trying to get together businesses and groups that otherwise would probably be sitting it out because, look, I don't have time to do that. I'm running my business. It is critically important that if you're a small business in this country, you're raising your voice and you're talking about energy. It's not a real popular topic. It's easier to talk about other issues, but you have to be talking about energy. You've got to be calling your congressmen, congresswomen, and your senators and letting them know that whatever you need to do to make it easier to build infrastructure in this country, you need to do it or you're not getting my vote next time around.
I like that. That's a good message. So Doug, you talk to your clients all the time about crisis situations, kind of other advice, and especially in communications. Sometimes we don't get that right. I can't say that lovingly. What do you advise your clients on a communications lens for what are they saying that's wrong? What are they saying? What should they be saying?
You know, one of the challenges that we often see, and those who are here are probably familiar with this, is actually knowing what you're talking about and knowing what your audience needs or wants to hear. Which is why target audience analysis and public opinion research and really deep dives into segmentation will help you sort of drive and create the right kinds of narratives and figure out where people get their information, how they use information, how information propagates, and we need to do a better job leveraging it. It's not just writing a letter anymore. The information environment is huge. It is the Wild West. And it's not just Facebook and it's not just Instagram. It is all of the above. You look at how the current president succeeded in sort of targeting so many little groups around the country, and it is exactly that. I mean, very, very micro-targeted effort, and I do think industry needs to do the same thing. Just assuming people want cheap energy doesn't really help you with the message. You really need to know the whys, where they're getting their data, and then what is it going to take for them to take action. And I think that's kind of the hard part, because a lot of people want to just skip to the campaign, right? Yeah. And that doesn't really work.
And that narrative has changed. I mean, we were talking before this, the Russian invasion of Ukraine changed the world's understanding of energy security. And so could you touch on that a little bit as well?
So, I mean, Europe, we could even go back even before then. We go back to Fukushima, in Japan, and suddenly Germany was going to shuttered all their nuclear. Japan shuttered all their nuclear, and they started relying on a lot of Russian energy. So the invasion of Ukraine, suddenly Germany is, the prices of energy in Germany go through the roof, and now they're revisiting, nuclear, and certainly Japan is revisiting nuclear. I mean, Japan's going so far to looking at a pipeline, all the way to Japan to get access. So, the political environment, sort of what Russia and Russia's engagement in Ukraine and the war in Ukraine did, is it really sort of drove home the need for domestic security, of all these countries, and certainly aligned countries, domestic energy security, which a lot of Europe didn't have.
Yep. So Lane, you mentioned Williams being previously known as a sleepy pipeline company. You are no longer that. You do really creative things, and the team at Williams has just been incredible on creative solutions to energy and all of the above. Can you talk a little bit about what critical infrastructure means, especially for the small businesses that might want to partner with Williams?
Yeah, I mean, look, we've got a 6,000 really passionate employees, and so we're primarily a natural gas pipeline company, and that infrastructure coming into the areas where you do business is critical because when you have a really cold day in the winter or you have a really warm day in the summer, you need that energy, you need that power. And it seems like a high-pressure natural gas pipeline is something you shouldn't be all that worried about. I mean, why do I care if that goes in 50 miles down the road? But you should, because that's the reliable battery if you're going to add more wind and solar to the grid. The wind doesn't blow all the time, the sun doesn't shine all the time, and so we're pushing very hard into those areas. We are also pushing into AI and providing power for hyperscalers. A lot of those projects are what we call behind the meter. In other words, they don't impact utility costs. They're not tied to the grid. We're going to provide power directly to that hyperscaler to run their data center and to run it on natural gas. And that way they can do it, they can pay for their power, and kind of the businesses who are drawing energy from the grid don't have to worry about essentially subsidizing Meta or Microsoft or other of these companies. And we have some solar projects across our footprint. Those are hard to make work from a financial standpoint, but where we can make them work, we are doing that as well.
I love it. Not a sleepy pipeline company anymore. Okay, for both of you, a little bit open-ended. In policy, politics, or business, what is the next big thing that the leaders in this room need to be paying attention to? Doug, I know you have a thought on this, so I'll go to you first.
I'm a big fan of nuclear, and I think this country has sort of dropped the ball post-Fukushima. I think Obama sort of shuttered a heavy DOE effort on new nuclear, and I don't even know if there's been a new nuclear permit pulled. I have one of my colleagues in the audience who could tell me. But all of the above needs to include nuclear. It is clean, and we have to solve the challenge of waste storage, and I think that's been a hot potato for 30, 40 years, and I think it's solvable if we have the right political will behind it. And I think that's something that we have an opportunity to do now.
That's going to take some permitting reform, huh?
Sure.
Just a little bit. Lane?
Yeah, look, I mean, we've come to a point in this country where, 40, 50 seats determine the House of Representatives. And if the states have their way, that number probably goes to 25 or 30. The way they gerrymander these districts is just ridiculous. And so I think you can do two things. One is beat the drum of consistent policy. I think Doug mentioned this. When things are moving like this, it's really hard to decide you're going to deploy $1 billion worth of capital. If you're a small business and a small move can really impact you, it's really hard to decide you're going to deploy $500,000 of capital. So I would be doing two things. One, I would be if you live in one of those, quote, purple districts, I would be hammering that representative to provide consistent policy. Be willing to vote with the Republicans if you have a Republican president. Be willing to vote with the Democrats if you have a Democratic president. And if you live in a district that is pretty heavily red or pretty heavily blue, don't give up. You ought to be calling that representative all the time. You ought to be voting. You ought to make sure people get out and vote in the primaries and trying to get people in office who are willing to look at, crossing that figurative line and doing what's best for the country. And look, Williams is pushing very hard at reducing emissions, but we have to be realistic about the fact that we are going to use more and more energy in this country and in the world. All we have ever done, this sounds counterintuitive, but it is true, all we in the world has ever done with energy efficiency is figure out a way to use more of it. So don't ever think we're going to use less energy. We are going to be using more energy. And if we want to bring people out of poverty, there are 1 billion people on this planet, maybe 1.5 billion, who are living off of something like half a barrel of oil equivalent every year on energy. I mean, there's 3 million kids that die every year because they're breathing, from cow dung to wood or manure that's being burned in the homes for either heat or cooking. We've got to solve that problem. We can, and the way to do it is to tell your representatives, because we are the leader of the world, to tell your representatives you need to start leading and quit worrying about whether or not you're voting with your House Speaker or you're not. Vote for good energy policy that allows it to be both reliable and affordable for everybody in this country. And if we can, we really can build that message. I mean, Doug is talking about how you communicate nowadays. It is very different than it was 40 years ago. I think it's actually easier to build that message today than it was 40 years ago.
Just building on what Lane said, it's not just other countries where people, don't have power. It's this country. This state, has, tens of thousands of people who have no power to their homes. I mean, this exists around the United States. So, we've got to solve this. I mean, we have people in this country who are burning coal in their homes for heat. That's serious stuff. And, we as a country need to solve that because that's just wrong.
And you can't solve it by different executive orders every 4 years. It's durable energy policy that will make these lasting changes. And what I often tell folks in the community is we plan in decades. Now, if the permitting process was reformed and we could get there a little bit faster, then we would. And we're going to need to. And I know that the next panel is talking about AI, so we won't steal their thunder. But gentlemen, any last thoughts for the group before we wrap up here?
I think this is probably a conversation we had 5 years ago, and 10 years ago, and 15 years ago. I mean, we were working, our firm, in this space actively around the country in terms of mobilizing groups and target audiences and so forth, and we're still having it. I think that on some levels, organizations like API, which in the past has had, some very well-funded programs, has learned some lessons, and hopefully doing things better. Certainly, companies like Williams has been emboldened. I think more companies that are in this space need to come together, such as this organization, and really get behind pushing advocacy for these programs. I mean, in a very, very narrow and quite honestly aggressive way. We should be worried about what people are going to think. There are always going to be people who don't like the energy industry, always. You're not going to change their minds. And so I think, quite frankly, being far more aggressive is going to have some better outcomes.
That's right. Before I give Lane the floor to close, I want to give a shout out to API members, many of them who are here today. We have our task force here with me. They are my thought partners in helping small businesses transform their capabilities, teaching them how to track their emissions so that when a large corporation is asking them about that information, they are ready to provide that information, helping them have a cybersecurity policy. Those are the things that if we don't teach them as an industry how to be compliant and how to be ready for growth and scale, no one else is going to teach them. And so we are working very diligently together to innovate and make sure that we are bringing everyone along so that everyone is ready for these opportunities when they come. Lane, any last thoughts?
Yeah, thanks. Well, look, first I want to recognize Susan Waller, Executive Director of Natural Allies. Susan is amazing. If you have any questions about these issues, talk to her. She'll educate you in a very productive way. Senator Landrieu, I don't know if she's in the room, but good grief, a Democrat who gets it. There are a lot of Democrats who don't, a lot of Republicans who don't either. She's one who does. Congressman Tim Ryan, who I think is going to be here. Amazing folks, and are really driving the train down the track and in the right direction. And I just want to close by thanking this Chamber of Commerce, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, for pulling this together, for getting these speakers up on the stage, and to giving a voice to an issue that really needs a voice. We should, it's trite, but energy should not be a partisan issue. We ought to be able to solve this problem in a very pragmatic way. And when you hear folks say, no more fossil fuels, you got to convince them otherwise. They're just dead wrong. Physics tells you they're dead wrong. When you hear people say, we don't need to worry at all about reducing our emissions, you need to convince them otherwise, because they're also dead wrong. And we need to create a swim lane in the middle of both politics, of business, and of policy that allows us to move forward with reliable, with inexpensive, and with affordable energy. And if we can do that, then we can let the Dems and the Rs get back to arguing about the size of government and what programs we ought to have and shouldn't have. And we can actually make some progress in this country. So thank you so much for having us up here. This is such an important event, and I'm just grateful that you invited me to be here. And I look forward to hearing the rest of the speakers. Thanks.
Gentlemen, thank you.
Yeah.
Tengo un sueño.
Welcome to Atlanta.
To join us, let me start over. That was your personal invitation to join us in September for our national conference in the city of Atlanta. We hope to see you all there. Next, we have a very relevant discussion, forgive me, I'm tongue-tied, featuring the role of AI and data centers in the evolving energy landscape. Please help me welcome to the stage the moderator of our closing fireside chat, President for Political Public Affairs at Moore, Ms. Heather Philpo. And our special guest, Senior Managing Director at Accenture, Vivek Chidambaram. Vivek, join us. You all are in for a treat, by the way.
Wonderful. I think this is on.
It is.
Perfect. Well, good afternoon, everyone. We're your closer. We're very excited to be here. My name is Heather Philpo, and I'm the president of Political and Public Affairs for Moore. If you are not familiar with our brand, we are the largest fundraising and marketing company in North America. We are end-to-end supply chain. My experience in the realm of data and analytics stretches back 15 years. I've been strategizing with political campaigns, trade associations, nonprofits, and political committees, really on how to maximize their revenues through the use of predictive AI and machine learning models. This past election cycle marked my 20th year in politics and my 5th presidential campaign that I consulted on. And so for those of you wondering which side of the aisle I fall on, data is neither red nor blue. It's agnostic, and so I've consulted for both sides. Vivek, you want to tell us about yourself?
Of course, sure thing. Super to be here, Heather. Wonderful event. And this is my first time here, and I'm almost certain I'll be back again. So thank you. In terms of roles, for Accenture, I am the vice chair of our resources industries. And the resources industries for us is a combination of energy, utilities, mining metal, paper pulp, that cluster of heavy industries. And I manage strategy for that cluster globally. And what does that involve? Lots of different things. It involves AI, it involves data centers. Lots of things generally means not much of anything. So that's what I do.
Awesome. All right, well, let's kick us off. So we're going to start by level setting a bit and talking about what is AI and what are the different types of AI. And I think it's important because with this emerging tech, so many of us know that it's necessary because of how we now communicate, how we conduct commerce, and really how we forecast our futures, that we need to be using this tech to really propel ourselves forward. But there are a few different types of AI that are out there. So why don't we dive in and talk about what they are?
And this is your space, Heather, so feel free to dive into them as you want to. For most folks, AI hit really hard 2 years back, right? When GPT hit, and you could get online and ask it to create your itinerary for a vacation or whatever it is that you ask, and it would do it in such a human fashion. That's when it hit for most of us. But in reality, this has been a long journey. 1952 was when Turing went off and started thinking about what would machines end up being. And there was a Turing test that was devised. I don't know how many of you have heard of them. It is at the moment that the machine becomes indistinguishable from a human, we have hit general intelligence, so to speak. And we're not quite there, but we're heading there. And there's several different types that have built on each other to get to that artificial intelligence domain, so to speak. And on the screen there, you see things around generative AI, which has really been about the pre-trained transformers, which is hit in a big fashion. You have deep learning, which is really neural nets that are learning one layer after the other. You have machine learning, which is an additional mechanism of learning on top of those neural nets. And then, of course, artificial intelligence. We're not quite there on artificial intelligence. But the last time I checked, there's a test called Humanity's Last Exam. Have any of you tried taking that? This is the hardest test that has been devised, which has experts in every field putting together the questions that show expertise in that particular domain. Most graduate students won't be able to understand what the question is, let alone answer it correctly. And right now we have the AI models starting to score about 25, 26% on those tests. For the longest time, they were hit at 10, right? If you look at the history of AI, until about 1983, it was backrooms, and then it started taking off, and now we are in the age of AI, make no mistake. And we're starting to hit about 25, 26. When that hits 50, we've got ourselves a tool that will power humanity forward.
And I think it's important to note that really predictive AI and machine learning is really married to generative AI. I like to call predictive AI the original workhorse, because when we used to build models in a SaaS-based environment, and we'd look at the different data sets that were available, and I'm talking roughly 10 years ago, we were modeling and building predictions off of roughly 25 to 30 data points at a time. And now with cloud-based infrastructures and data centers, data lakes, all of these different things that now exist in the new world, we're able to take thousands of variables and be able to micro-target our predictions on steroids in a way that we've never been able to do it, cheaper and more effective. And so it's interesting that that really acts as the back end to what we see in the generative AI sense, where it is the creation of videos, imagery, a lot of different things. Do you want to touch on that for a second?
Yeah, and this is happening as we speak, Heather. You know the space really well. We are starting to see a multimodal convergence, right? You started with chat, which is a language-based approach. You then added text, you added videos, you added images, and you started to function in terms of how a business operates, right? How do businesses operate? How do you and I work in a business? You have specialists in a certain process. They do what they can do in that process, and they pass it to another specialist who adds more to that process. And before you know it, you have a piece of information or a widget that comes out at the end of that process. Now, if you can start to channel that together, and you can have visual information, you can have graphs that are part of your processing, this multimodal environment, then you are starting to replicate human expertise in running that process. In fact, I don't know how many of you have heard, we probably have the first smell-based AI models. Yeah, so models that can look at the molecule. You have sensors, an artificial nose that can sense something. Think about it in a refining environment where you have a gas leak. You can have a robotic dog that can sense that and then come back and initiate a set of actions to prevent that leak from causing damage. That's the kind of multimodality that we are starting to emerge, that we're getting into. And each of those will change the way that we work, make no mistake of it.
So that's interesting. So, all right, so we've talked about what this tech is and why it's powerful, but let's talk about why it's transformational within the energy sector. Let's bring it home and make it relevant.
Yeah, so this technology is probably the most transformative tech that we in our lifetimes will encounter. And part of the problem that is difficult to put our minds around it is because we have heard that before, right? We've heard that about blockchain. We've heard that about cloud. We've heard that about a number of different technologies because that's what technology companies do, right? They talk to you about the technology of the day. What is different about this is that it is something that functions so much like a human. And therefore, this process domain that I was describing, which is the backbone of companies, backbone of corporations, backbone of how you and I work, it's starting to hit that. And when it starts to hit that, the impact it has on people and work is massive. Today, a lot of the work is around language models, right? But you and I don't think in terms of language by predicting the next word that I use. That's how these models work, right? An encoder-decoder model is working on predicting the next word. Right? The cow jumped over the moon. And it's learning everything to predict that next word. But that's not the way we function. We are very, very early in this journey. Very quickly, we function by thinking about the next sentence. You and I are now thinking about the next idea that we would talk about. So we will very quickly move into models that are about context, which talk about the next sentences, and then into ideas. And then we are getting much closer to AGI. And most of the truly visionary leaders, Bill Gates and those sort of folks, believe that we are closer to AGI than most forecasts are putting it at.
And I think just the applications for AI are really fascinating, especially for this sector in particular. I mean, because you think about, say, from an exploration standpoint, how AI is optimizing how we explore both from a renewable and a non-renewable side of the house. You have sustainability, which is also big on people's minds. And then, of course, we're also facing aging infrastructure. And now you see the introductions of smart grids really come into play. And AI is playing a role in being able to optimize and now measure energy output so that sustainability is occurring. Do you want to kind of touch on that?
Yeah. This, if you hit the next one, it starts to get into the impact on energy. And that impact is dramatic. And it's in every aspect of the energy value chain, right? So you hit on subsurface, seismic. How do I interpret seismic? This is the core of an oil and gas company. Then I've got to figure out what is the capital projects that I build. How do I build a project? That happens in oil and gas. And like I said, I have broad responsibility across our resources industries. It happens in every resource, right? Whether I'm mining lithium, whether I'm putting a generation facility in place, whether I'm putting a transmission facility in place, I have to manage that capital project. Then I start to think about, once I put that project in place, I have to operate, right? There are things that are changing. The fluid stream is changing constantly. I have to think about how to manage that. I have to think about what chemicals to inject. The depth of the industry can be managed in an effective fashion. I have to think about what maintenance to do. I have to think about how work is occurring to execute that maintenance. Every space of that, environmental, what are leaks that are that might be there? How do I detect those leaks? How do I detect when an ESP is going to go down? It is going to touch every aspect of that workflow. And about 40 to 50% of the work output from an industry in these big, massive resources industries will be changed in some fashion.
So that's, okay, so you're the energy expert.
Yeah.
I'm trying to keep up. You're the energy expert. Where are they placing their bets?
Yeah.
Like, where are the investments being made within this tech? Like, what does that look like, big picture?
Yeah, in many ways, energy moved the slowest of all the industries. We have 13 industry groups, 13 industries, and they're clustered into 5 industry groups. I run one of them, right? The others are financial services, consumer media, and so on and so forth. The very first hits in terms of dramatically changing workflow were not in the resources industries. And you all are pros in the space. You know why. Because when we get something wrong, you have a blowout, people die. We cannot get it wrong. We have to be super careful that we don't damage the environment, we don't damage people's lives. These are really tenets of the industry. So we were very cautious. And if you hit the next one, it starts to show you these graphs on how the energy industry was actually behind for a long period of time at the board level in terms of using AI to change the way that we work. And that chart started changing about the middle of last year. And it started changing because we recognized that AI was both an opportunity from a growth business perspective and an enabler to change the way that we were doing work. And the change the way that we are doing work part of it, I hit earlier, where we talked about what is it going to do to our business, subsurface, production, so on and so forth. But it's also a massive, massive growth lever. It is going to mean that I need more gas. It is going to mean that I need more data centers. It is going to mean that I have to then take the gas away and sequester the carbon. It's going to mean things around how I manage infrastructure. These spaces are where the bets are being placed, and there's going to be huge opportunity for smaller startups to participate in these spaces. And why is that? Because when you think about those massive processes that haven't changed for 50 years, there are interface losses in each of those processes, right? This is why companies cannot entirely vertically integrate across the process. This is why there's a supplier ecosystem, and you all are part of that supplier ecosystem, and this is going to have a massive opportunity for that supplier ecosystem. You're going to have smaller suppliers with language models that are in the public domain and expertise completely change how work happens, right?
Well, that's what's fascinating is just the democratization of this tech has really leveled the playing field. I mean, and you could take it across sectors. It's not just energy, it's everywhere. And so it's allowing the little guys and the mid-sized companies to have a shot at now from a competition standpoint. And so I think that that's where that also comes into play and is really important, is just being able to allow more players into the space.
And this is your area of expertise. This is data, neither blue or red. And this is about using that data in a different fashion to change the way that a small player can participate in a massive industry.
It's true. No, it is. And so with that in mind, how do you see the energy sector implementing these technologies? I mean, how are they executing on them? And what does scale look like?
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to the process core, right? Because these industries are designed around processes. So if you get the process backbone, pick an example. you have a well that goes down because an ESP has failed, and I have to figure out how to replace that ESP. Common problem. You have a whole bunch of wells in New Mexico here. We talked about the Permian Basin, and you have a well and an ESP failure. Well, you can predict when the ESP is going to fail if you have sufficient data points, all the predictive content that you talked about when you started. But most importantly, typically the time for you to replace the ESP and get the well back is not about predicting when the ESP is going to fail. It's about all of the other things that have to happen in that process. You have to pull it from the warehouse. You have to make sure that the power is turned off before the field crew gets there. You've got to make sure that you have a crew that is getting it from the warehouse transported in. You've got to have the SIMOPS around the field. It's all these other things. And here's where the supplier ecosystem has a massive opportunity, because you can start to feed this data into that ecosystem. You can start to provide services to that process. And before you know it, the interface losses in that process are cut, and you have massive efficiency as a consequence. And we are seeing things, I mean, this is not 10, 15% changes in the way a process is executed. I have teams running things that have gone from 19 weeks to 3 weeks implemented in place.
Oh, the acceleration of all of it is fascinating. And so because we promised we'd talk about data centers, we're going to do that now. Now we're going to talk about data centers. And my question to you, Vivek, is what are the real opportunities that we're seeing with the creation of these data centers? Because we've talked about, from an infrastructure standpoint, we've talked about overall demand, consumption, sustainability. So how are these data centers, how are they built to really create opportunities within the sector?
Yeah. No, if you step back for a minute, the United States is the greatest economic engine and platform that has ever been built in the history of the world. I came in here as a poor immigrant, and here I am sitting with you having this conversation.
And I'm sitting with you.
And this is what... No, thank you, appreciate it. And this is truly what this country allows us to do. And as you think about that domination that we've had, we've been absolutely dominant, yeah? As you know, if you go back 20 years, Europe, Western Europe, and the United States had roughly similar GDP per capita. Mm-hmm. Since then, we have doubled. We've doubled. I mean, it's just unbelievable how much talent we bring in and what platform we provide to that talent. And as you think about what that next wave of advantage globally is going to be for us, it is in AI. This is why we are so focused on it. This is why we are thinking about protecting certain things. But if you really look at the history of civilizations, we step back even further, which I like to do sometimes. When you put people together of different backgrounds and ideas, magic happens, right? Yeah. Whether that is the Romans, whether that is Alexandria, I don't care where it is. When you put that together, magic happens. And we have to maintain that while we win in AI. That is what is going to keep that unique engine alive and thriving. So then you start to think about what does it take to make that win happen. We today produce about 1.2 terawatts of power. About 176 gigawatts of that goes into data centers. Yeah. We are anticipating that number will grow to about 400 gigawatts of power. Where is that power going to come from? And so keep that in the context of this great economic engine, AI, a need to win in that AI space, massive investments from the technology companies, $70 to $80 billion. I mean, think about the CapEx that is going in from our tech industry into the space, into chips. And that has to be supported by this 176 gigawatts that I described going to 400. And clearly I have, like I said, I do a lot of different things. So I do, AI, I do some tech, I do some energy, and so I can see this mix of things completely connected together. That growth has to come from sustainable sources, but it cannot come only from sustainable sources. So gas will be a big mix, nuclear will be part of it, potentially geothermal, solar, and wind. So there's going to be opportunities in all these spaces from an infrastructure build perspective to support that growth to go from 176 to 400. And just to put it in context, 400 gigawatts is today's German consumption. We're going to add a Germany to our country in terms of power demand within 6 years.
Yeah, that's
and the how sits in this room, right? You all have to figure out how to do it.
We've got the experts in the room. So I think just to kind of put a bow on all of this, my last question for you. If you had a crystal ball, right, and you could see 5 to 10 years into the future, what are some emerging technologies in AI and data that you believe will have a significant impact within the energy sector?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought I'll answer this with a little fun video, or a story rather, just because it's lunch and this will be fun. This is a researcher of ours, and she's got off-the-shelf brainwave technology, and this is real. I'm not making it up. You wear this on your head, and it's got the conductivity, the electrical conductivity on your scalp is what it's measuring. And it can, she sees a picture, and that picture is converted into a brainwave, yeah? And that's what you're seeing in the top part of that picture, what she saw and what we recorded. And now you can train this model. You're done with training it. And based on that picture that she saw, if you tell her after, imagine a goldfish, a manasvi, the AI can see the signal and produce the picture at the bottom. And that's today. Yeah? We are at the point where we can start to think our ideas into reality.
It's here.
It's here.
It's here.
It's here. So round the corner, this is here, yeah? So I will now get to the round the corner side of it. We are going to see convergence of different models, whether that is text, whether that is smell, whether that is thought. You're going to see this convergence of multimodal models come into place. You're going to find that AI grows a physical presence. So you're going to start to see things that can be done as a consequence of edge AI changing the way that you're doing work. I mean, you're going to see this first in things that are somewhat mundane. You're going to see robotic pool cleaners, for example.
I think from a data perspective, what will be most interesting, given that we're here, is how are we categorizing those data points? Because there are a handful of different types of data sets that we would use to really build predictive models and machine learning algorithms. And we have demographics, which I would say is the least sexiest, but the most necessary. You've got behavioral data. We have attitudinal, which are your surveys. And you also have transactional data also as part of that. And when you marry all these data points together, it's really giving you a 360-degree profile of who you are as a person. And that's really, really critical when we're doing outreach to you. We want to make sure our outreach is always relevant. And AI allows for efficiency and allows for our communications to now be very, very relevant and hyper-personalized. So when you are now introducing data points as in sensory, right? Touch, smell, taste, things of that nature, it will be interesting to see how we categorize all of those. And then, of course, use these here in the real world.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're going to see data becoming more and more important. You're going to see the ability to process that data becoming more and more important. This is why, from a country perspective, there is going to be a race on AI domination.
World domination.
And this is in our hands. And you're going to start. If you hit the next one, just to finish up, you're starting to see very, very quickly that the workflow in specific areas of our industry are being changed. You see this thing around agentic AI. I don't know if you're familiar with it, you've started hearing about it, but essentially this is a hierarchy of agents that can do a specific task that can be called by agents on top of their hierarchy, right? So let's say there's an agent that can pull a time history, another agent that can analyze the time history, a third agent that can say what is the inventory that is available, and an orchestrator agent that can got all of that to then send a dispatch crew to change that ESP that was down that I described. This is there in place today. Now these agents will start to grow arms and legs, and will start to interact in terms of how people and agents form a combined workforce. That is where we are headed very, very quickly. And I'll stop with that.
Awesome. Vivek, thank you so much. Thank you all so much. We've had a great time.
Thank you.